Right people, welcome to JP Boxing. I've got a massive fight preview and prediction for us to discuss today. It's actually the first fight preview and prediction I've done for a while, but what a one to bounce back with, man. The first of many though, I must say. I'll get that in quick just before I jump into this fight. I'm going to be back flat out with all the videos now, people, talking boxing all day, every day, previews and predictions for all the big fights coming up and all the small fights too. So if you want to find out my predictions and talk boxing with me about every single fight coming up in the boxing world, then make sure you like and subscribe, because there's a lot coming up and there's a lot to discuss. But first of all, let's just focus on this one this weekend, and what a one it is for me to bounce back with, man. Terence Bud Crawford, the pound for pound king in many people's eyes, still definitely a pound for pound contender in that number 1, 2 or number 3 spot, going up in weight once again, looking to become a 4-weight world champion, taking on Israil Madrimov, the WBA super welterweight champion, in a fight that, as we get closer, a lot of people are expecting to be a really tough one for Terence Crawford. When it was first announced, I was like, yeah, it's a really good fight. It's a really good challenge for Crawford. But your first thought, as always, when it's the pound for pound king, shall we say, or someone just as good as Terence Crawford, it's a bit like the Mayweather effect, how he used to be in Canelo up into a few years ago. You go, yeah, it's Terence Crawford, man. It don't matter who he's fighting, he's got it. Now he's dealt with the likes of Errol Spence in the fashion he did. You kind of just overlook the opponent a little bit. But, as I said, as we've drawn closer, the people start studying, the people start watching a bit of Madrimov. I've done loads of studying over the last few days myself, and you're like, shit, this actually really is a very tough fight for Terence Crawford, and it's not a given that he wins this fight. It's not a given that he stays unbeaten here. It's not a given that Israil Madrimov doesn't get in there and bash Terence Crawford up, which some of the experts are actually predicting to happen now. Now, I'm still always Team Crawford. The guy is phenomenal, man. I think he could go up to middleweight, super middleweight, the Canelo fight. We'll talk about that another time. But I think he's good enough and got just about enough size to go up to middleweight and beat some of the champions there. So I've kind of given away my pick there early doors. I am going with Terence Crawford, but as you'll see when I go on to discuss this fight and break it down a bit, don't overlook this one. Don't miss this one. I think it's going to be a Crawford win just because maybe you haven't heard of Madrimov or something like that. Go and watch Madrimov, man. It is going to be a very tough fight for Terence Crawford on Saturday night. So yeah, let's jump into it. Just a quick bit about the stats. I'm sure I don't need to tell you much about Terence Crawford. 40-0, 31 KOs. 3-weight world champion already, 2-weight undisputed champion already. As I said, going up in weight here, his first fight at light middleweight, going straight in with arguably, probably the, people would say the best champion at light middleweight, but there is a little bit of a debate there with the likes of Sebastian Fundora, people like that, but definitely the most informed champion at light middleweight. Only 10-0 though, 10 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw. 7 KOs, so he's really in the early stages of his career. But the thing with Madrimov, his amateur record is sensational, man. 350 wins and 20 losses, won pretty much every tournament you can think of other than the Olympics, which apparently he was very hard done by not to get picked for that in his country of Uzbekistan. So yeah, you can imagine, man, with 370 amateur fights at the highest level, this guy has faced every single type of fighter out there. But as we do know, the pro game is different. But what we've seen from him in the professional game so far, man, is nothing short of phenomenal, really, for a guy who's only had 11 fights. He won the title in his last fight, the vacant WBA title it was at the time, against Kurbanov, a guy who was 25-0, looking real good himself. And Madrimov jumped in there and bashed him up, stopped him in 5 rounds and made really easy work of it. Other than that, he's got a couple fights with Michel Soro. First fight, won over 9 rounds, had a rematch for some reason, and it was stopped on a cut in the 3rd round, but he was already dominating that fight and bashing Soro up. So he hasn't competed at that elite top level yet, but he's just emerged there now. So it's kind of the unknown a little bit as well, which makes this a bit more intriguing as well, because obviously if you speak to some Sorrow fans and people that really believe his hype, he's a brilliant fighter that's running through everyone. They're calling him the next GGG, and it's not just because of his looks. He does look a hell of a lot like him, not just because he's from that part of the world, but there's a lot of similarities in their style too. I actually think, sorry, I was going to call him Kurbanov there. Madrimov is actually a bit sharper on his feet and a bit sharper and more explosive with the punches than Golovkin was. I'm not saying he's a better fighter than Golovkin, of course. Golovkin had many strengths in other ways, but Madrimov has got that brute force, but with the explosive jumping in sort of ability too. And he can switch stance, which makes it even more intriguing. You've got Terence Crawford, who is the best switch hitter in the game. Madrimov is arguably up there as one of the guys just underneath that who can switch very well. It's going to be very interesting to see how these guys match up and how they go at it. Obviously, size-wise, we've got to look at Crawford going up in weight. Crawford 5'8" with a 74-inch reach, and Madrimov 5'9". If you look here, there's really not much difference in size at all. Obviously, Madrimov a bit more filled out, but height-wise is pretty much the same. As I said, he's 5'9". 69-inch reach though, so Crawford, we know he's got incredibly long arms. As he's gone through each weight, he's had massive reach advantage. He's still a light middleweight now, he's got a massive reach advantage. He's got freakishly long arms, which he uses to the best of his ability all the time. We always see him popping guys up from the outside and they just can't get near him. Ages, obviously Crawford getting on a bit, 36 years old, but still looking at his very best. Madrimov, 29 years old, just coming into his peak and his prime now. By the looks of it, age could become a factor. We haven't seen Crawford look old yet, but he's been out the ring for over a year now. Last fight was the Spence fight, going up in weight, training starting to take his toll. You never know. It's another question mark there. But with the greats like Terence Crawford, it's like Mayweather as well, how he used to just overcome and defy logic. Age ain't going to be a thing. Going up in weight ain't going to be a thing. Ring rust ain't going to be a thing. It's Terence fucking Crawford, man. He overcomes these things all the time, or he's that good he doesn't even need to overcome them. The things that affect other fighters don't affect him. Now, how do I think this fight's going to go? How do I think they're going to size up against each other? How do I think they're going to start off? Terence Crawford, obviously, has always been a bit of a slow starter, but then in the Errol Spence fight, he got going very early, but that's because Errol Spence came onto him quite quick. Now, Madrimov is a very, very fast starter, a bit too fast sometimes, and then he can burn out in the later rounds, but he is going to jump on Terence Crawford straight away. He's going to look to use that size, strength, and weight advantage. He's going to look to bully Crawford. Now, could that play into Crawford's hands, or will it work for Madrimov? It depends how Crawford handles the jump up in weight. You'd think if he can handle the jump up in weight comfortably, it's going to play into Crawford's hands. He's one of the best counter punchers out there. I do think, though, Madrimov will have success in the early rounds. I think maybe the first 3, 4, maybe 5 rounds, you could see, say after round 5, Madrimov 3-2 or 4-1 up, having landed some big shots on Terence Crawford. The chin is going to be interesting here as well. How is Crawford going to handle the power of Madrimov? I would never say Terence Crawford's chinny, but I do say he's vulnerable to get here and get hurt. As we saw, I think it was Mean Machine, rocked him a little bit. Avanesian buzzed him once or twice. But he has still got a solid chin. He's very tough, Crawford. But this is going to be a whole other ball game up at light middleweight with one of the hardest punchers in the light middleweight division right now. And a guy that's super strong that might actually be able to wrestle with Crawford and throw him around a little bit. Something else Crawford has never faced before. So I think early stages, Madrimov will be doing the better work. And you might be a bit like, oh shit, could this be Madrimov's night? But then, great boxers like Terence Crawford, they make adjustments, and I expect around like the round 4, 5, 6 mark, you'll see him start to pick Madrimov off a little bit more, switch stances a bit more, angle off a bit more. I think in this one, we're going to have to see Terence Crawford go back to maybe like light welterweight Terence Crawford, lightweight Terence Crawford, that boxed and moved and picked you off as he was coming in. He can't try and walk Madrimov down like he's done against pretty much everyone he fought at welterweight. It will not work fighting on the inside and trying to walk a guy like this down. I think Madrimov will be stronger and hit harder, and it could be too risky for Crawford. I think he'll know that. I think after the first few rounds, he'll know that anyway. He might try and walk him down in the early stages, but after the first few rounds, I think he'll think, okay, let me just pick this guy off. Then he starts to get on his boxing, boxing and moving, looking brilliant, uppercuts, hooks from either stance. You know how Terence Crawford does it. And then I think the difference in this fight could be that he might drop Madrimov once or twice in around 8 or 9, as Madrimov's tiring after really putting a shift in and really trying to beat the #1 fighter on the planet. He might be working a bit too hard to try and prove himself, and I think he'll walk onto a couple shots, get dropped once or twice, as I said, in round 8 or 9, and then Crawford from there just sticks smart, boxes and moves, maybe goes at it a little bit more in the later rounds, but I think we see Terence Crawford go the distance for the first time in like 12 fights or whatever it is here. Finds the first opponent in like 12 fights he can't get out of there before the final bell. But I do still think it will be a Terence Crawford victory. He becomes 4-weight world champion, states even more of a claim to be pound for pound #1. If we're looking at scorecards, I'll say unanimous decision, but probably like a 116. What would it be if there's a couple knockdowns? 110, maybe a 115. 111, something like that. So a few rounds in it. Madrimov winning some rounds in there, but I think Terence Crawford wins this one. But I'm not writing Madrimov off. You would be a fool to do that. He's a very, very good fighter. It's a very tough fight for Terence Crawford, and you've got to give the man massive respect, because the position he's in now, he could have retired, but he's hungry for more. He could have took a little warm-up fight first at light middleweight, but he would probably think if someone offered that to him, he'd be like, fuck that, I want the best straight away. After this, he says he wants Canelo. That's a video for another time. That's another big talking point. First, he's got to get through this fight. I believe he will. Terence Bud Crawford, close unanimous decision across the board. Let me know your picks for this, people, and stay tuned, because it's not just this fight on this card. It is a phenomenal show. The first show that Riyadh season and Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh, His Excellency, are bringing over to the United States. You've got Ruiz versus Miller on the undercard, Bakodi versus Jared Anderson, 2 brilliant heavyweight fights. I'm going to have predictions for that dropping tomorrow. Andy Cruz, Pitbull Cruz, David Morrell. It's a phenomenal show from top to bottom, so make sure you tune in for this Saturday night. Thank you for watching, people, and if you're liking my videos, please like and subscribe. Thank you.